Here we're just using the green screen, as you can see, and I'm not sure what that is there. Anyway, we're using the green screen without the virtual background, and this actually looks better than with the virtual background. So we'll see how it goes. All right. Yeah, Raymond Anderson is really challenging me because he and I have obviously got different objectives. He's got one objective when he's writing these daily guides for June 2025. But I have another one. His objective is to get the attention of people who would describe themselves as subscribing to science of mind or religious science in general, and Centers for Spiritual Living in particular, and even broader, probably New Thought. But I know a lot of people who watch this, as I mentioned yesterday, kind of are not people who would say, I subscribe to New Thoughts. I like a lot of the ideas in it, but I don't know if I am really subscribing to religious science or unity or any New Thoughts organization. But I know a lot of people do like a lot of the principles. So my challenge is that when a writer comes along and writes something specifically intended for people who are part of Centers for Spiritual Living, and not even New Thoughts in general, I've got to work my way around this because my audience isn't simply people who Ernest Holmes would say belong to religious science, which is now Centers for Spiritual Living. It isn't. My audience is much broader. It's not even intended for people who would describe themselves as religious. It may not even be intended for people who describe themselves as spiritual. It covers both of those, but it also covers people who would call themselves, humanists. So I've got to move around this. So bear with me as I go through this. I've read this whole thing, obviously, to start with. So bear with me as I attempt to reach two audiences. I owe it to the people in Centers for Spiritual Living to speak to them, but I also owe it to everybody else to speak to them too. So here goes. This is my best attempt at doing both of that. He calls it the best kept secret, and this title in itself is actually intended for people in Centers for Spiritual Living saying, hey, you've got this great philosophy. Why don't you share it with the world? But as Centers for Spiritual Living. My take is, hey, we have this great philosophy which anybody of any religion or no religion can use to improve their life. So that's where I'm coming from. So the first quote is from George Orwell. You remember the 1984 book and so on. If you want to keep a secret, you must also hide it from yourself. In other words, practice what you preach. And Ernest Holmes, this applies to anybody. Holmes wrote to everybody. He didn't write specifically just to people who subscribe to, his organization. The secret place of the Most High is not a location, but a state of thought, an interior awareness, a spiritual faith. Okay? And he wrote that in This Thing Called Life on page 112, paragraph 2. Holmes was a prolific writer. He was also a prolific speaker. One of the, if not the authority on Holmes is Reverend Dr. Jesse Jennings, my senior minister. And he says that Ernest Holmes actually was a much better orator than he was a writer. And that a lot of the best stuff from Ernest Holmes that's easiest to understand, not necessarily best in quality, but the best to understand is stuff that is really literally a transliteration of what he said when he was having these seminar lectures and so on. Anyway, this is Raymond Anderson. He says, typically, when we refer to something being a secret, we mean something not known or not meant to be known by others. In Psalm 91:1 of the Hebrew Scriptures, that is, quote, the secret place of the Most High, unquote. And in the above quote from Holmes, the word secret refers to the nature of God's protection, how it covers, shelters, and hides us from harm. It refers to a deep closeness and intimacy with God, a truth we are generally unaware of. Now, this next piece is specifically intended for people in Centers for Spiritual Living. He says, are we studying, practicing, and living in a way that makes the truth known? So, are you sharing what you believe is the truth? Do we share this magazine with friends or family? Obviously, I do because I read from it. Or do we refrain because we don't want to appear to be proselytizing? We're not typically a proselytizing group. In other words, we don't try and convert people. Holmes never wanted to convert anybody. He did want to offer them a philosophy that would actually help them improve their life. And we said this numerous times, and I've said it recently. And then he says, is it because we don't know who we are, or is it because we're afraid others won't understand or accept us once we come out? So he's kind of likening it to somebody coming out in the gay sense of the word. And then he continues on. I'll comment on this in a minute. Are we content continuing to be the best kept secret? Do we want our communities to be overflowing with activities, with participation and increased membership? Do we want this magazine to have millions of subscribers? Do we want a world that works for all? Well, strictly speaking straightly to people in Centers for Spiritual Living, yeah, it's my view that this is good and I share it. But I also tell people, you don't have to go to a spiritual center to apply this stuff. I think you benefit when you do. Why? Because of community. Community is incredibly important. Can you gain lots of benefit from this material if you don't become a member of Centers for Spiritual Living or other New Thought communities? Of course you can. But will you get a lot more out of it if you were a member? Absolutely. He says, do we want a world that works for all? I don't think you'd be watching and listening to this if you didn't want a world that works for all. Now, then he says, if we do, then we must embody this. And whether you believe you want to spread this word or not, or you just want to use it for yourself, this central core philosophy is here. There's only one life. And that life is whatever you want to call it, God, Spirit, the universe, the all, the ground of all being, that which brought the universe or the multiverse into existence. And that life is living as you now. If it's all there is, it doesn't have any option. There is no other choice than the fact that you are a living expression of it. And it's technicolor. Yeah, it's got lots of different expressions. Thank God if we were all the same, it would be a boring world. He says, if you're ready to thrive and boldly be who and what you are, then no more secrets. So this sense is, yeah, it's to CSL, Centers for Spiritual Living, but it's also to anybody. I mean, you want to keep it from yourself? Do you want to express it? And if you are not a member of CSL, and that's okay, then if you find that what we teach works for you, and essentially what we teach is that God is all there is, or there's one source of life for everything. There's one source of the universe, and if there are multiple universes, there's one source of the multiverse. And then we embody one of the major teachings of Jesus, and you don't have to be a Christian to embody this because Jesus wasn't the only one who taught it. Lots of people have taught it, but Jesus is the best example in the West. When he says, it's done unto you as you believe. So I'm an expression of one divine source, one source of all, and I believe it's done unto me as I believe. Really and truly, you can get along with just that, and you don't have to be a religious, a spiritual person to do that. I think it helps if you are. I think when you practice meditation, when you belong to a community, I personally think it helps your life to be better. But you don't have to be. I mean, this in its own way, and what Reverend Lisa does, and she'll be on tomorrow morning at 9:15. That's community. You know, a community doesn't have to be in person. I think it's better when it is in person, but it doesn't have to be. It can be online. Some people have no choice but to be online. I'm figuring out how to go online to the Netherlands in Dutch, and we'll figure it out somehow with help from other people. But the bottom line is, you don't have to be physically present to be part of a community. But I'll tell you this, and I've mentioned it before, when I started teaching back at Lone Star College again, so the Academy for Lifelong Learning, when I started being allowed to have students in the room again, in particular in the world religions class I teach, it was a much better experience. I mean, it really and truly was. So, my message to everyone is, hey, if you like this material, whether you're a member of CSL or not, if you think that this works for you, please share it. And if you're a member of CSL, you can tell people, I'm a member of Centers for Spiritual Living. It's a New Thought community. It's part of Science of Mind. And Ernest Thomas, the founder, is the one who introduced this to the world. But he wasn't the one who thought it out. He just changed the way it was presented from people who had gone before him. So there you are. And one important thing Ernest Holmes said was, let this teaching be open at the top. We don't know it all. People are going to come along, he said this, who know more than we do. Let's utilize their ideas. So this isn't a stagnant teaching. It's a vibrant teaching that changes as it goes along. So that is my contribution to what this reading could have been and what I want it to be. So my final message is, I think these principles are great. I think it's more a philosophy, as much a philosophy as a religion, and I think it can be used by anybody, anywhere, anytime. So I really don't like long affirmations because I like an affirmation that you can use and repeat. I'm a technicolor expression of the glorious beauty of the universe. Hey, that's enough in itself. I am a technicolor expression of the glorious beauty of the universe. I show all that I am and all I believe by how I live my life. Yes, practice what you preach. You could even say that. I practice what I preach. I demonstrate who I am by the way I live. And they're all good affirmations. So I already mentioned Reverend Lisa. I'll be back tomorrow, hopefully around about 5 o'clock. But until next time, please take care of yourselves. It's starting to get hot in lots of parts of the country, here in particular. Just remember, don't spend too much time in the sun. Use sunscreen if you need to do, and stay hydrated and just be careful. So until next time, namaste.